was terrific. Yeah.
Ready, Moish? Better behave now. Ready? Max, you ready? You're live.
Do you want to take the mic and do this?
Ready, Max? Live. So there may be a problem with the stream, and if so, we will record it and we will try to post it later. Welcome, everybody. We are so grateful that the North Louisiana Jewish Federation has reinstated some scholar in-residence, and this is the first time we've had one. I think we were trying to guess since Rabbi Kowaler was rabbi here, and that was a while ago. Because since Rabbi Kowaler, there have been other people at Agudath Achim, and it's been a long time. And so we are so grateful, and if you've been to any of his presentations, and I've been to all of them, you will be very grateful that you're here today, right now. And he keeps talking about, Benzy keeps talking about how this is going to be the thing, you gotta hear this one, you gotta hear this one. I'm very excited to hear this one especially. So in case you haven't heard, I'm going to make him blush again and say who he is and why we are proud to have him here. So his official name is Benzy Kogen, and I just pushed a button and there it was. Benzy Kogen, we call him Benzy Kogen, and he is a consultant for leadership and education. He has devoted his career to senior leadership positions within the Jewish community in the worlds of Jewish education and nonprofits. He serves as a faculty member of the Melton School for Adult Jewish Studies of the Hebrew University. His course offerings include both undergraduate and graduate students in the areas of Jewish history, which is what we're going to hit today, Jews and Islam, Jewish ethics, the book of Samuel 2, and Beyond Borders. Benzy has had a long and fruitful relationship with Camps Ramah. Who went to Camp Ramah? Noise. With Camps Ramah, currently serving in a summer leadership role at Camp Ramah in California. Additionally, Benzy serves as cantor at the Jewish Home for the Aging in Reseda, California, during the year as well as over the High Holy Days. I had the pleasure of getting to hear him sing during the services. Rabbi Sidney and I were talking about how cool it was to sit and sing with him. He's got a gorgeous voice. And he knows all the prayers, and he sings the melodies I know. Founder and creator of what's called Your Shabbat Guest, a program of enhanced Shabbat celebration, learning, and growth. Benzy is a master educator who has devoted himself to the building of communities and the enhancement of Jewish life. He has led seminars for educators and taught in congregations across the United States and Canada. And now he can say he's been to the Deep South. He's taught through the age spectrum, from elementary school to learners at the adult level. His joy as a teacher is bringing the joy of classical Jewish text and tradition to learners of all ages, and I'm going to add, and is really apparent in the way he's teaching. We love to watch him teach. Benzy lives in Reseda, California, which I told him is what we call the other LA. He's served as a member of the Board of Trustees and Executive Committee at Shomrei Torah Synagogue in West Hills, as well as on the Executive Committee of the Pacific Southwest region of the United Synagogue of Conservative Judaism. Currently, Benzy serves as a member of the Board of Overseers for the Ziegler School of Rabbinic Studies in Los Angeles, which Rabbi Sidney and Rabbi Feivel keep pointing out. Not only is that where they met, but it's also where they were ordained. Pretty cool. Benzy holds undergraduate degrees from Columbia University and JTS, the Jewish Theological Seminary of America, as well as dual master's degrees in educational administration from Teachers College of Columbia University. I don't want to keep talking, but his resume keeps going, but I would really like to pass this on to Benzy Kogen.
Thank you. Oh, whoa, this is loud.
Keep it far away.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to try this on for size. Could we lower this a little bit?
Who's on it?
I am on one. Okay. Okay, a little better, right? I can use my indoor voice. So this is a first for me, because I'm going to try greeting this group with a greeting that most of you give each other. and I'm going to say, how you all doing? Did I do okay? Yeah? Okay, good, good. So we're going to talk today about the power of memory and using a lens of memory. That's a very sophisticated expression. A lens of memory in understanding and enhancing our own history. Okay, that's a big sentence. When I say a lens of memory, what do you guys think I mean? First, let's go to the fidgeters here. What do you guys think I mean? What does it mean? The lens of memory. Okay, so, all right, that's okay. They'll get a chance. They'll get a chance. How about the high five people? What does it mean? A lens of memory. Yeah. What's your name? Okay, Natalia. Go ahead.
To look in. I guess you on public TV.
Hello?
To look in.
To look in.
To look into a memory. Okay, good. What else? Anybody else? Yeah.
Eli.
To look closer into our memories.
To look closer into our memories and see, like, how many of them are memories? How many of them are things that are passed on to us? Okay, table one of adults. What do you guys say?
Can I make a comment first about this table? It feels like they're talking about the lens almost as just predominantly a microscope
Okay,
or a telescope kind of lens, which is pretty cool.
okay.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm going to agree with the younger group. It's like looking through a lens to make it focus better.
Ah, looking through a lens to make it focus better. Good, good. Anybody else from the first adult table? What do you think?
I think whatever you say is correct.
Whatever I say is correct. Thank you very much. Okay, well, have a great day, guys. I'm leaving. Okay, how about this table? Yeah.
Can I expand on Dr. Silverblatt's comment? On Dr. Silverblatt's comment, when I and probably others in this room go to visit Dr. Silverblatt, who's an optometrist, he not only says, "Oh, this is what your vision is like. Look, CE, right? You can read these letters," but he allows us. He makes the picture clearer for us so that we can better see the world around us.
Right, excellent, excellent. I, for one, am a person who has memorized every single eye chart known to man, which is why I don't wear glasses right now. Okay, anybody else from this table? Yeah.
Social memory.
Okay, individual or social memory, right? Individual memory, that's something that happened to me, and social memory that happened to all of us. Good, yeah?
A lens can also reflect things so that when you're looking to the eye and you've got the retina behind it, it reverses the image.
Wow. Okay. You look into the eye and you got the retina and it reverses the image. So it's like it sort of comes back to you.
And you have to process it.
Right. You have to process it. All right. So let's talk about individual significant memories. Significant memories. Okay? I'm going to start with the high five people first. Give me a sense of what the most significant memory of your lifetime is. It could be depressing ones.
They're depressing ones.
They're depressing ones. Okay, okay. Depressing memories.
That's significant.
Yeah,
That's-
those
that was a good
are.
call.
Anybody else? Anybody else? Yeah. Go ahead.
A bar bat mitzvah.
A bar or bat mitzvah. Wow. A bar or bat mitzvah is an experience that turns out to be a multi-generational memory. Okay? What's your name? Eli. Eli, it's not just your memory, it's your memory, it's very personal to you, but it's also a significant memory for the generation before you, and if you're lucky, the generation before that as well. Okay? Adult table number 1. A sentinel event.
I remember in grade school when Reagan was shot.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Just it's burned in my head, and for no other reason other than it was just something that I don't know why that sticks with you, but
right.
you know, it's just.
Okay, so I first of all, I appreciate your youth. Secondly, some of those memories which are etched into our national and international context. Okay, for example, this will give you a clue. I was 10 years old when President Kennedy was shot. I remember it as if it was yesterday. Okay, I remember it as if it was yesterday, and that experience, and the experience then also of his brother being shot, and the experience 2 months before that of Martin Luther King Jr. being shot, really formulated, really helped to shape who I am as an individual, and on some level made me very angry with America, and on other levels made me very proud to be an American. And I say proud to be an American because the way the country reacted, President Kennedy was shot, and within hours there was a new president. And the transfer of power was really quite powerful. Okay? There's something to be said for that, because it could have been what they call a military coup, and 3 days later people would have said, President who? That's not what this country is about. Okay? Another piece. If I was 10 years old when President Kennedy was shot, I was a little over 11 years old when the Beatles were on Ed Sullivan. Right, there you go. That was absolutely remarkable, and it changed. I mean, all of us, within 2 months of that, I was able to shake my hair, and it shook. And my parents were angry. When are you going to get a haircut? They didn't say y'all because they're not y'all speakers, but they said, when are you going to get a haircut? And I said, I don't know. My mother says, I don't know. And I said, yeah, I don't know. I think it's going to be my choice as to whether I get a haircut or not. If it's good for the Beatles, it's good for me. Wow. My mother was angry with me for about 4 days. Yeah.
Make an example for these two tables?
Sure.
All right, think back to when you were told you weren't going to school because of the pandemic. Right? So that's an example, I think, that you know,
Okay.
these guys probably have. You guys have another one? No? Okay.
Look, the entire country closed down. And this weekend is actually, as I understand it, I can't tell you how deeply honored I am to be here for this weekend, because it's the first public, community-wide Jewish weekend that's taken place here in 2 years. So, to the leadership of the community, to the clergy of the community, thank you very much for bringing me. I'm really honored to be here, but we need to remember that the lessons that we learn from the pandemic are important lessons, and hopefully, as we put it in the rearview mirror, we can say to our kids, you can say, God willing, to your kids, that there once was a pandemic and the country closed down, and people will say, nah, it couldn't have happened. But it did happen. It did happen. All right, so I'm going to introduce you to an Israeli author. The Israeli author, we're not going to read him in Hebrew, though his Hebrew is amazing. We're not going to read him in Hebrew. His name is Aharon Meged. And Aharon Meged was an award-winning author who wrote among other things, a short story, part of which we're going to read together, called The Name. The Name. Now, in order to set the table for the story, we need to understand that naming a child is a very important responsibility. Whoever has, in fact, named a child, and I hope that none of you guys have, and I hope that certainly none of you guys have, yet. Okay. But, and that's also important. But naming a child is an important transmission of history. It's an important set of memories. And it's, in many circles, it's very, very odd when a child is born and given a name that has nothing to do with those who came before him or her. It's not so odd at this point because there are so many Megans and Crystals and Jasmines and people like that running around. But traditionally, as Jews, we have two names. We have our name that we present to the secular world, and we have our Hebrew names. And very oftentimes, the Hebrew name represents somebody or somebodies that we're named for, and might even take us back to a generation or two or three that doesn't exist, and not just physically, but that has been eliminated from the world. Eliminated from the world. So, Aharon Meget's short story, The Name, brings us to 3 generations of a family that are wrestling among each other for what a new child is going, what name that new child is going to carry. What name the new child is going to carry. All right, so first, before we even open up the text, we'll finish setting the table by asking people in the room to talk a little bit about who they're named for. Who are you named for? And if you have a Hebrew name, which relative or which occasion, some people are named for an occasion, which relative, which occasion are you named for, and what do you know about that person that you were named for? Yeah.
Okay.
This is my trusted Vanna White over here. Jonna White.
My Hebrew name is Sarah, and I'm named after my paternal grandmother. She died even before my parents met. She came over from a little village. It was in Russia at that time. It was demolished. It was outside of Odessa, which is now Ukraine. And when she came over,
for the time being.
yeah. And when she came over, they asked her what her birthday was, and she said the 8th day of Hanukkah. So immigration gave her December 8th for her birthday.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right. So that's already a link. The immigration experience helped to shape the identities of many people from many countries. So, for example, there's this age-old story about a guy getting off the boat in Ellis Island. And this big, tough Irish cop, inspector rather, says, "What's your name?" And he says, in Yiddish, "Shen Fergessen." He was overwhelmed by the experience, and he said, basically, "I forgot." So Shane Ferguson becomes Sean Ferguson. And the irony is that Sean Ferguson was a Kohen. I don't know about that, but it's so this is how people inherit a history when they move from one place to the other. Now, your maternal grandmother, paternal grandmother was someone who lived in a place that had, at best, fungible or portable borders. Okay, because Odessa has been under the flag of at least 2 countries that I know of. There are people who I know from the same family. One was born 10 years before in Russia, and without moving, the younger sibling was born in Poland. All right, so it's really kind of tricky. Okay, so we're going to take a look at the story and what it tells us. We have some characters that emerge in the story, and it's in the handout that's on your tables, and we're going to read a paragraph or 2 and stop, and then we're going to unpack what we read. Okay, because I want everybody to have an idea of what it is that we're covering, who the characters are. You don't mind if I sit, right? Okay, good. So we're gonna take a look at these characters and see what they bring to our collective memories. Okay? Let's start with somebody from the high five table. Give the microphone over. We're on page 895. It's labeled text number 1, and I should give credit. This short story is part of a unit of study from the Melton School of Adult Studies where I teach. So I had to give credit because otherwise the executive director of Melton's going to chase me down. Okay, so who would like to read? What's your name?
Lillian.
Okay, Lillian, get us started.
Then Rachel came with a proposal for a compromise, that the child should be named Menachem, a Hebrew name, she said, an Israeli one, by all standards. Many children bore it, and it occurred to nobody to make fun of them. Even grandfather had agreed to it after much arguing.
Okay, stop for a sec. Okay, this is a very interesting piece. We need to remember we're in Israel in about the early 1960s. The state is not yet 20 years old, and Rachel, who is going to be the grandmother, I believe, comes up with a compromise name. So it means that the parents of this impending child were coming up with all sorts of names, and grandfather Ziskin, the aging grandfather, going to be great-grandfather, agreed with the name. And the name that they came up with was Menachem. Okay, what does Menachem mean? Anybody know what Menachem means? Yeah. Comforter. It means he who brings comfort. He who brings comfort. Okay? And grandfather Ziskin agrees that this could be a working name. Okay, let's continue.
We have chosen a name, Mother, she said, which we both like, and we won't change it for another. Menachem is a name which reeks of old age, a name which for me is connected with sad memories and people I don't like. Menachem you could call only a boy who is short, weak, and not good looking. Let's not talk about it anymore, Mother.
Okay, so this is now a reaction from Raya. Raya, how does Raya react to Menachem as a name? Not crazy about it. It would be understating it. All right. So what does the name Menachem conjure up for her? Old men, short, stumpy men, weaklings. People, nothing attractive in that name Menachem. And so she's basically stating her position here on the name Menachem, and she says, let's not talk about it anymore. Okay? Now, what does that mean? Does that mean the conversation is over? No, we got a few more pages to go, okay? The conversation is not over, and the agony has not ended. Okay? Let's take a reader. Let's take a reader from this table. Who wants to read? Okay, okay. Yep, okay, we're at Rachel was silent.
Rachel was silent. She was almost despaired of convincing them. At last she said, "And are you ready to take the responsibility of going against grandfather's wishes?"
Okay, going against grandfather's wishes. Okay, now, why is she using grandfather here? Or how is she using grandfather here? Grandfather agreed to Menachem. Okay, so so she says, are you ready to take the responsibility of going against grandfather's wishes? Okay, continue.
Rhea's eyes opened wide, and fear was reflected in them. "Why do you make such a fateful thing of it? You frighten me," she said, and burst into tears. She began to fear for her offspring as one fears the evil eye.
Go ahead. Another little paragraph.
"And perhaps there was something fateful in it," whispered Rachel without raising her eyes. She flinched at her own words.
Another one.
"What is it?" insisted Rhea, with a frightened look at her mother.
Go ahead.
"I don't know," she said. "Perhaps all the same we are bound to retain the names of the dead in order to leave a remembrance of them." She was not sure herself whether there was any truth in what she said or whether it was merely a stupid belief. But her father's faith was before her, stronger than her own doubts and her daughter's simple and understandable opposition.
Okay, thank you. Great job. Great job. So what does it mean now, this notion of naming for the dead? What is it all about? Naming for the dead. This is one of the great divides, by the way, between Sephardi and Ashkenazi culture. Okay? The Ashkenazi culture does not believe in naming for the living, and the Sephardi culture, and the Ashkenazi culture, the Ashkenazi culture does not believe in naming for the living, and the Sephardi culture believes in naming for the living. All right? So what is the controversy here, or what is the obsession that is pointed out here in terms of naming for the dead? Why is this family so committed to naming for a deceased relative? Remembrance, okay, remembrance. And what kind of remembrances might be involved there?
You end up telling stories about the person who's gone by explaining why you chose the name.
Right, okay, good. So your name carries a legacy. Okay, adult table over here. Why name for the dead as opposed to for the living?
Because even today, you can go Google what are the most popular names for 2022, and a name that was popular, 10 years ago or 20 years ago is no longer popular.
Right.
And I don't see this as really a religious type of deal. I see it more as a generational, how names that become popular, or maybe you were named after a family member, but now the connotation, well, I know a lot of people with that name now, and I don't want to use that name anymore.
Right.
And it's
And
a
none of them are
generational
named
thing.
Menachem, by the way.
Right. So,
Right?
exactly.
Okay, good. Anybody from the high five table, what do you say? Naming for the dead or naming for the living? Yeah.
Both. I mean, it's to usually to honor someone, and they can be dead to remember them, or living to like celebrate them being alive then.
Okay. So celebrating their lives and placing them in the pantheon. Everybody know what the pantheon is? Anybody know what the pantheon is? Well, basically in an arena, but in that big mythological temple. Place them in the pantheon of the history of the family. All right, this is a very important distinction here.
May I?
Yeah.
We had, in our family, we do this, and we always named for deceased relatives, and we felt that we were honoring the memory of that person and continuing, as if it was continuing the spirit of the person. In Max's dad's family, which was Italian and not specifically Sephardic, the firstborn male child was always given the name of the paternal grandfather, whether they were alive or dead. So often you would have a generation of lots of people with the same name, the father, the grandfather, and then the grandchildren. And in many Sephardim, they name for living relatives to honor that memory. And not the memory, but to honor the life of that person. And we had almost like I guess you might call it a superstition, that if we, because our tradition was to name for deceased people, if we named for someone living, it was as if we were expecting that person to be dead.
Right.
And
right.
if you did the opposite, if you were Sephardic and you would name for someone who was dead, it was as if you were, it was not a good omen for the child.
Right, right, good, okay. But I don't always want to remember all those dreadful things, Mother. It's impossible that this memory should always hang about this house and that your poor child should bear it. Wow. So before we read further, what kind of memories are involved here?
Can I ask, I know that we've spoken about before, I've spoken about this with some of the people from Miss Rebecca's table, that at Agudath Achim we have a prayer where we thank God for reviving the dead, and we're not talking about zombies. So what did we talk about when we were talking about thanking God for reviving the dead? What does that mean? How do you revive the dead?
Yeah, oh. We got two people at this table. Go ahead.
Like, I was going to say that. For letting us remember them.
Okay, letting us remember them?
I was going to say what she was saying.
Okay, letting us remember them. So it's a privilege then to remember those that came before us, even if the memories may not be so pleasant.
We had that, by the way. When we named Max, we gave him the name Max because it was his paternal grandfather's name, who was still alive, Zichrono Livracha now. One of his names was Max. But we gave Max the middle name of Ori, named for his grandfather's sister, who had died long before I had met his dad, and no one had named for her. So at one point, Max was almost 2 years old, and I was at their house in Italy, and I was talking to my mother-in-law, and I said, tell me about Orietta. I would really like to share some stories with Max of the person he was named for. And she said that woman was a sad, miserable person. Her mother, Orietta's mother said, God forbid anyone should name their child for her, because my mother-in-law had offered to name her daughter Orietta. God forbid anyone should name her child for that. Nobody told me that before I named my child for that.
Right, right.
So we did a tap dance around it, but yeah,
All right.
that's part of naming.
I think we need to look back at the time that this is set in, because all of these names are probably linked to stories, of the Shoah and of the old country, and people trying to make a new, or trying to break away from that and make a new start versus, remembering and being focused on tragedy.
So you just wrote the next part of the story, which is good, because we need to remember early 1960s, the Shoah, the Holocaust, was barely being talked about. In Israel, there was a generation of Jews that wanted this state to be modern and not mired or burdened with memories. not burdened with memories. And frankly, it was just in the mid-60s here in America that people started talking about the Holocaust. 20 years after the war ended is when people, most notably Elie Wiesel and then others, wrote and talked about their experiences. And many of us don't even remember a time when we didn't talk about the Holocaust. But there was a time, and it was a profound time in our history. Okay, we're on page 896, the paragraph that begins, Rachel understood. Let's take somebody from this table. Who would like to take it? Okay.
Rachel understood. She too heard such a cry within her as she listened to her father talking, sunk in memories of the past, as if to herself, she said in a whisper, I don't know. At times it seems to me that it's not grandfather who's suffering from loss of memory, but ourselves, all of us.
Okay, turn the page and continue one more paragraph.
About 2 weeks before the birth was due, grandfather Ziskind appeared to Raya and Yehuda's home for the second time. His face was yellow, angry, and the light had faded from his eyes. He greeted them, but did not favor Raya so much as a glance, as if he had pronounced a ban upon the sinner. Turning to Yehuda, he said, I wish to speak to you.
Okay, I wish to speak to you. Okay, this is likely going to be a very ominous moment in the family. Okay, so 2 weeks go by from conversation number 1 to conversation number 2. Grandfather Ziskin appears at the door and basically walks by his daughter as if she didn't exist and says to Yehuda, I wish to speak to you. Okay. Pick a reader, any reader.
They went into the inner room. Grandfather sat down on the chair and placed the palm of his hand on the edge of the table, as was his wont, and Yehuda sat lower than he on the bed. Rachel has told me that you don't want to call the child by my grandchild's name, he said. Yes, said Yehuda defendedly. Perhaps you'll explain to me why, he asked. We, stammered Yehuda, who found it difficult to face the piercing gaze of the old man. The name simply doesn't appeal to us. Keep going? Or?
Yeah, please.
Grandfather was silent. Then he said, I understand that Mendel doesn't appeal to you, not a Hebrew name. Granted, but Menachem, what's wrong with Menachem? It was obvious that he was controlling his feelings with difficulty.
Okay, so this is like gunfight at the OK Corral, right? Grandfather is coming to make his last pitch for a name, and he says, I can understand you don't want Mendele. You don't want Mendele. Mendele is too Yiddishy, too old worldly. I can understand that. But Menachem? How could you not want Menachem? And the way the author has it, there's smoke coming out of Grandfather Ziskin's ears. Okay, he is just fit to be tied here. All right. It's not Yehuda knew that there was no use explaining. They were two generations apart in their ideas. It's not an Israeli name. It's from the Gola. From the Gola. So it's not an Israeli name. Menachem is not an Israeli name. It's from the Gola. What does the word Gola mean? It's anything outside of Israel, which means it's a diaspora name. A diaspora name. So what could be a reason for a modern Israeli, or a person who thinks of himself as a modern Israeli, not giving his son a name from the Gola? Yeah, Rabbi Sid.
The big thing that's been in my The big thing that's been in my brain this whole time is I'm named after my great-grandfather, Sidney, and in my grandparents' generation, and well, really my parents' generation and before then, the thinking, especially on my dad's side, they're from this classical reform, they're very, very classical reform and would be rolling over in their graves knowing that their granddaughter, great-granddaughter kept kosher and wore a talit and kippah when davening, but their thinking was, look British, think Yiddish. And so they would never name a child or grandchild a Hebrew name. You wanted to fit in with society. And so I've been thinking the past few minutes about how Sydney, the name Sydney, kind of ties me to some sort of modernity. I cannot become Orthodox. I could never become Orthodox because that would just be such a dishonor to my grandparents and my great-grandparents. So I find myself somewhere in the middle. They're probably still rolling in their graves, but it's somewhere in the middle of those two extremes because I still come from that line of look British, think Yiddish.
Right. So you're a classic Reforma Conserva Docs person. All right. So that and that's an important piece. Okay. It's not a modern name. It's not an Israeli name. It's from the Gola. Right, let's have somebody from the High Five continue. It's line 80 on page 898.
Gola, repeated grandfather. He shook with rage, but somehow he maintained his self-control. Quietly he added, we all come from the Gola. I and Raya's father and mother, your father and mother, all of us. Yes, said Yehuda. He resented the fact that he was being dragged into an argument which was distasteful to him, particularly with this old man whose mind was already not quite clear. Only out of respect did he restrain himself from shouting, that's that and it's done with. Yes, but we were born in this country, he said aloud. That's different.
Okay, so it's Gola. And grandfather Ziskin, or as Megat called him, Saba Ziskin, is going to try and reframe it and say, well, aren't we all from the Gola? Aren't we all from outside of Israel? Aren't we all from a different world? We all come from the Gola. Everybody in this family comes from the Gola. And Yehuda says, yes, but Yehuda's really ticked because he doesn't want to get dragged into an argument with an old man who could have a heart attack on him because he is so passionate about this. And he says, yes, but we were born in this country, and that's different. Okay? How many of us have relatives who were born in a different country and who shed or gave up most of their old world practices because they were moving to a new world, a land of opportunity, a land where the streets are paved with gold, right? How many of us know people like that? I know people like that. Yeah? Yeah? Right. So this is really the flip of that. So when Yehuda says to him, yes, but we were born in this country, wow, that's different. That's different. All right, let's continue. The reader from that table did a great job. Continue. Okay.
Grandfather Ziskin looked at him contemptuously. Before him he saw a wretched boar, an empty vessel. You, that is to say, think that there's something new here, he said. That everything that was there is past and gone, dead without a sequel. That you are starting everything anew.
Okay, stop. So grandfather Ziskin is saying what to his grandson-in-law? What is he saying? Do you mean to tell me that there was nothing good over there? That everything that's good is what's here? How can you say that? How can you say that? And you can envision more smoke coming out of his ears. All right, so from this table now, let's get a reader.
I didn't say that. I only said we were born in this country. You were born here, very nice, said Grandfather Siskin with rising emotion. So what of it? What's so remarkable about that? In what way are you superior to those who were born there? Are you cleverer than they, more cultured? Are you greater than they in Torah or good deeds? Is your blood redder than theirs? Grandfather Siskin looked as if he could wring Yehuda's neck. I didn't say that either. I said here it's different. Grandfather Siskin's patience with idle words was exhausted.
Okay, so Grandfather Ziskin is like, he's fighting his last fight here. All right, and what is he saying to his grandson-in-law? Are you better than the people from the Golan? Are you more cultured? Are you greater in Torah or in good deeds, meaning Torah or mitzvot? Is your blood redder than theirs? I didn't say that either. I just said it's different. Grandfather Ziskin's patience with idle words was exhausted. So let's pause for a second and say, how is this story going to end? How is this story going to end? Is there going to be a winner? Is there going to be a loser? And what do we think the baby's going to be named? Yeah.
I would compromise. The first name can be whatever Yehuda and Raya want it to be. Let the middle name reflect the past.
Wow. Okay. So there's linkage then with the world we're living in and the world we may have come from. Okay? Other thoughts? The baby's a girl. The baby's a girl. So right. But you know what? I don't know that there's necessarily a girl equivalent for Menachem. I mean, there probably is. Nechama is probably a good, yeah. Miriam to keep the initial. Okay. Right. They don't know the answer to, and it's at this point it's not clear who's going to win this fight. Okay, so coming to this point, how many of us have had these conflicts between the generations in our own families? Yeah? Okay. And how many of the actual parents who were going to have the baby gave the baby the name they actually wanted to? Okay. Okay.
My child's original name, we used the name that we chose, which was a holiday name. We didn't mean it that way, but it worked out that they were born Erev Shavuot.
Uh-huh.
And then we chose a non-Jewish name as a middle name.
Okay.
That was from my husband, who is Jewish family.
Okay. Good.
Well, like Sandra's grandparents, or my grandparents on my paternal side were from Russia, which is now Ukraine, and they were going to name me after my paternal grandfather. But the name, and they actually, when they came here, they were members of AA, and they were conservative, and his name was so Jewish, they compromised and they shortened it, so it's my middle name.
And
So
what is
my middle name is Z, which is Z-E-E.
Right.
And that's
Oh.
my son's name also. My paternal grandfather's name was Zissy.
Uh-huh.
And they didn't want, my brothers and sisters didn't want Zissy the sissy. That's what I was told.
Okay.
If they'd only known who the turn into, it wouldn't have been a problem.
Well, and you actually ended up being big and strong, so you could defend yourself. Okay, good. Now let's go to Grandfather Ziskin's stance on this, where it looks like he's going to lose it. Okay, let's take a volunteer from. Can we get a volunteer from this table?
I think someone who's pointing a finger at someone else should be.
It starts with you good for nothing.
You good for nothing, he burst out in his rage. What do you know about what was there? What do you know of the people that were there? The communities, the cities? What do you know of the life they had there? Yes, said Yehuda, his spirit crushed, but we no longer have any ties with it.
Okay, so Grandfather Ziskin says, what do you know about that life? How can you say that? And Yehuda says, but we no longer have any ties with it. We no longer have any ties with it.
So
Wow.
in our family, that was the point. The point was to tie yourself to those things with,
Right.
with a name.
Right, okay, continue
was
the
the
reading. Yep, yep.
You have no ties with it? Grandfather Ziskind bent towards him. His lip quivered in fury. With what? With what do you have ties? We have with this country, said Yehuda, and gave an involuntary smile.
So he's backed up against a corner, and he says, we have ties with this country. With this country. We spilled blood for this country. We have ties with this country. And Grandfather Ziskin's, come on. Okay, there we go. All right, let's take a reader from this table. Here we go.
Fool, Grandfather Ziskin shot at him. Do you think that people come to a desert and make themselves a nation? Huh? That you are the first of some new race? That you're not the son of your father, not the grandson of your grandfather? Do you want to forget them? Are you ashamed of them for having had 100 times more culture and education than you have? Why? Why everything here he included?
Okay, now skip a page.
Okay, wait a minute.
Extra page there, so skip the next to the page right after that page.
As soon as we turn the page. Okay.
Right up there, yeah.
Everything around him in the sweep of his arms is no more than a puddle of tap water against the big sea that was there. What have you here? A mixed multitude, 70 languages, 70 distinct groups, customs, a way of life? Why, every home is there a nation in itself, with its own customs and its own names. And with this you have ties, you say. Yehuda lowered his eyes and was silent.
Okay, so I asked before, how do you think the story is going to end? So how does the story end? Who said it doesn't? It doesn't end. It doesn't end. And why first of all, why read a story that doesn't have an ending? Because there are questions that emerge from it. Yeah, you have something?
I was gonna say that. Yeah, there like you have more questions to ask, and it gets you thinking.
Okay, you have more questions to ask, and hopefully more answers to come up with. All right? Yeah. Go ahead.
This is an ongoing issue. It didn't stop in the 60s. You know, this argument between the generations happens again and again.
Okay. It happens again and again. Okay? Yeah.
In every case, it's different. Sometimes it might end in a break in the family, and sometimes it might just come to a resolve, but every time it's different.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Every time is different. So, yeah, another one. Good. High five. Go ahead.
It leaves room for another book.
It leaves room for a sequel. A sequel. Though, you know what? I think that each one of us ultimately could write that sequel. Because that sequel exists within each one of us. So we have here now, we are at a very interesting juncture this weekend. Yesterday and Friday night, it was pointed out that this Shabbat that we just celebrated is called Shabbat HaGadol, the big Shabbos. And Shabbat HaGadol is actually the last Shabbat of slavery before the people leave Egypt and venture on to freedom and essentially begin to write their own history and begin to shape their own destiny with a little bit of guidance from God, but much of what they do is controlled by them. Friday night, and for those who celebrate a second day of Pesach, Saturday night as well, comes the Passover Seder. The Passover Seder is not just matzah and horseradish and brisket, but the Passover Seder is a telling of a story. It's a telling of a story, and one of the key paragraphs in our Haggadah is that we are all obligated, as we read the Haggadah, obligated to the best extent of our ability, we are obligated to see ourselves as if we personally left Egypt from slavery. How do we do that? How do we do that? How do we see ourselves as if we personally left Egypt? Probably an easier question for the people who run the kitchen to answer, but how do we do that personally?
In our family, we not only retell the story, but we always relate it to current events, because we see the repetition of slavery, we see the need for freedom of all nations. So we constantly update the story to keep it alive and remember why we needed to be free.
Great, thank you. Thank you for that.
We taste it.
We taste it. Okay, we have simanim, we have symbols of the transition from slavery to freedom. Okay, who likes charoset? Everybody likes charoset. What does charoset symbolize?
Mortar.
It symbolizes mortar.
Blech.
The basic building blocks that the slaves needed to use in order to build those big structures for the king of Egypt. Okay? So we make something sweet out of it. Who likes horseradish? Okay? Who grinds their own horseradish? Sometimes. Okay? Ground horseradish is enough to make you cry. And it's enough to make you think about the bitterness of the experience in Egypt. So before I even get to the Seder table, I've had a good cry. I've had a good cry. Now, there are other things that we eat on Pesach, and Pesach is not just about eating. Pesach is about remembering and reflecting and understanding that our history as a people began as slaves. That was the first Golah. That was the first diaspora, was Egypt. Was Egypt. And the really interesting thing is that first Golah led us to Eretz Yisrael, to the Promised Land, and then we experienced diaspora again just a few hundred short years later. After the destruction of our second temple, we have had nothing but diaspora until the Zionists began in the 19th century. So it's almost 1900 years went by before people could actually put shovel in the ground and build something Jewish in Eretz Yisrael, which is not to say that there wasn't a Jewish presence in Eretz Yisrael, but certainly not anything really formidable. So we have had this roller coaster in our history. And you know something? It's really, really very interesting. There was a generation of Jews that named their male sons Alexander. Why do they name their sons Alexander? They named their sons Alexander for Alexander the Great, who conquered most of the known world, but when he got to Judea, he said, they can continue living the way they've been living. It was the descendants of Alexander who made life miserable for the Jews on occasion, on more than one occasion. And there is another generation. Anybody know any Jews named Cyrus? That's a generational name, okay? Cyrus was the ruler in Babylonia who said 70 years after the destruction of the first temple, he said, Jews, you can go back to Eretz Yisrael and worship as you will. So there's a generation of Jews, they're probably all gone by now, but there's a generation of Jews named Cyrus. And we have other names that are taken from, not necessarily from the playbook of Jewish history, but we have other names that are taken from rulers who were good to the Jews. Okay, rulers who were, I don't know that there are many Jews these days who would name their kids after Vladimir Putin, for example. Okay? That's a pretty safe bet. On the other hand, yeah.
So I grew up with people whose parents were named Adolf.
Okay.
And
Parents were named Adolf.
And
right.
I don't think you're going to name your kid Adolf anymore.
Right. How many of you know Jews who are not known as Frank, but Franklin? That's another good one, because there was a stretch of time where the Jews thought that Franklin Delano Roosevelt walked on water. Okay? And that's something that we don't really lose, but that's all part of the power of a name and the memories, whether it's an old world name or a new world name. And we don't know how this story ends. Okay, Melton created a situation for us, my sponsoring organization created a situation for us where we don't know, and for the sake of the story, it's really, really good that we don't know, because we can wonder and we can take those questions with us to make another set of questions for our Pesach Seder.
I was just going to comment that I know some people who are considering the name Ruth now for Justice Ginsburg.
Ah, good. So Ruth for Justice Ginsburg, a good choice, a good choice. How are we fixed for time?
It's 11:30. We can keep talking if we want. May I say something though? What you started thing, it made me think about
Sure.
what does it mean to we are obligated to feel as if we left Egypt, and I think that's the way I saw it. So I took a graduate level class about religion, and the professor said that religion is kind of like the glasses that you put on and through which you see the world, because glasses can also modify what you see. You know, you talk about the rose-colored glasses, or it could make things fuzzier, it could make things clearer, it could change things a little bit. So when you talked about the slavery, I imagine Friday morning, the people at these tables, they're going to go to school Friday morning, and they're going to be wearing their school glasses.
Right.
And then when the Seder starts, we're supposed to put on our slave glasses. We're supposed to see the world as if we were slaves.
Right.
And it's what you were talking about for lenses, and I was just imagining almost physical lenses about how we see it and how we act and how we taste it.
Right. So when I teach, especially when I teach Jewish history, I love to say, we're going to read this 12th century text with 12th century lenses on. And we're going to start to unpack it, but as we unpack it, we're going to put our 21st century lenses on. And we're going to ask, how does this text speak to us? What can we take away from this text that is of importance to us? It's important. It's really important for us to bear in mind the fact that we are transmitters of history. Every one of us is a transmitter of history. And that's why, for me, in every generation, we are required to see ourselves as if we personally left Egypt. And hopefully, by the end of the Seder, and certainly by the end of Pesach, we should appreciate what it's like to live as free people in a country that respects things like a transition of power, that respects things like remembering those who came before us. And if we can do that, then in the words of the Haggadah, Dayenu, we've achieved what we need to achieve. Okay? Thank you all very, very much.
Dayenu.
I have to tell you that this is the first time that I've ever done this session in a 3-generational setting. And it's very special for me because everybody came in with a different set of luggage. A different set of luggage. And we unified over the text of this story. So thank you very much. Thank you, Shreveport, for making this weekend possible. I'm honored to have been here. And that's it.
Thank you.